Hello and welcome to the 1946 podcast, Season 1. We're your hosts, Brent Roberts.
And I am Sharon Rocky Roggio, and this is a podcast about our 32-day road trip in an RV hitting 15 cities across America. Let's do it. This episode includes talk of suicide and self-harm. If you or someone you know is in an emotional crisis, reach out to the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing or texting 988.
Let's start talking about where we went. So our first stop was Temecula. So we went south. Temecula is just above San Diego County, one of the first stops in Riverside County. And I talk about San Diego because I loved my experience there. I got sober in San Diego. I'm now over 11 years sober, and I found such incredible people and community there. It's a very military type city, so it's a blend of red and blue people living together. But then you get up into Temecula, and it's a bit more red, near Murrieta, where there was a story a few years back about even immigrants who had made their way to Murrieta, California, and the collective heads there put them all on a bus and bust them out, and people try to stand and blockade that bus. So there's a lot of chaos happening in this area in Temecula. And we got to meet a church that's taking a stand there with the Temecula Methodist Church, and a beautiful host named Rachel, who cooked an awesome meal for us upon arrival in her beautiful home. And then also she spoke at our event as well as a guest speaker. And then we got to do an interview with her.
So I actually met Rachel because of the TikTok when 1946 got on social and really started doing a lot of stuff. Rachel is very active in her community. And I always think it's interesting when you think of California, you think of it as a major blue state. Oh no, there are red pockets, and it's definitely red there.
Yeah.
And so I was learning a lot from her experience as a mother there and working with the school board and her LGBTQ child and an ex-pastor at the church. She left the church after she picked her child essentially. But so we went there and we got to meet for the first time in real life, which we'll show everybody in a little bit here.
She's really cool.
She's amazing.
Really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I had friends drive up from San Diego to come see me, some clients, a veteran and his wife. And it was just from the get-go, feeling family and friends, straight allies come and support, and how vital and important and crucial that is for our straight friends and family to say, your shoulders are going to get a break here, and I'm going to stand in the gap for you. That always warms my heart like nothing else in friendship and allyship of, let me handle this conversation for you, or chime in the comments or whatever. There's like, you should be on vacation, you should be out enjoying your freedom versus battling the latest and greatest book or TikTok account that's saying the old tropey things about the gay and LGBTQ community. So yeah. It was a great stop.
Yeah. Well, before
Temecula.
we get into all the people we met at Temecula, let's get into the introduction when Rachel and I met for the first time.
Okay.
All right, let's show it.
Watched you so much online.
Same.
Same.
Awesome. Same here.
So my name is Rachel Dennis, and I live here in Temecula. I grew up in San Diego County. Grew up in the evangelical church, Tim LaHaye and David Jeremiah. I had a pretty bad experience in youth group with a teen pregnancy. And my family was somewhat shunned over it. And so I left the church for quite a while. And then when got married, thought, I better go back to raise my kids in the church. We moved up to Temecula after living in San Diego. And once up here, I didn't have a career any longer. And so I went into teen ministry because I thought that I just wanted to go and love all the kids, no matter what, so they could have a different experience than I had. This eventually led me into adult ministry in Temecula as a community pastor. So around this time, I had my daughter in the Christian school, and some church members first came to me and outed my youngest daughter to me and told me that she was gay. And me initially, having fear for myself, really, what does this mean for me as a pastor? And so there, were some talks in the home of me sitting her down and telling her she was wrong and to be quiet. Of course, she didn't change. And then in 6th grade, she was outed to me by her principal. I witnessed parents calling in, kids telling my daughter they couldn't eat lunch with her anymore. Faggot, I hate saying that word, faggot strings and jokes and go to hell, all of it. After a period of time, my daughter tried to take her own life. And I'll tell you, cops banging on your door at 2 a.m. and running in your daughter's room and seeing pills all over is going to make you step back. And I thought, you know what? This theology is going to kill my daughter, literally kill her. And I had to research what will bring my daughter life. The gospel is supposed to be good news for everybody. Why is it bad news for my daughter? Around this time, through the course of all of this, I saw some clips of 1946. The movie wasn't done yet, but I saw these little clips. And each of these little clips gave me a little bit of information that helped me to dive deeper on my own. And I realized there's a whole theology that's entirely different if you look further into the translations of these words. We affirm queer people because God loves all, affirms all of us. And that theology is right there in the Bible to love. I am the prime example of why you do not out your children before they're ready. It has to be in their time. I wasn't ready. But yes, it has to be on the child's time. And this is where I also find, man, it's just one person. One person can save my daughter's life. That can be me. That can be me. I remember getting to a certain point and going to the leadership at my church and saying, you know what? I'm ready to advocate for my daughter. Is this going to be a problem for you? Do I need to step down? And they said no. And so I did. I started advocating for my daughter and the queer community to be welcome, not only welcomed, but to be affirmed in the church. It's caused a lot of problems. Welcoming will say, we welcome you, you're still a sinner. Affirming will say, God made you the way you are and you're beautiful and we love you. Don't change. I don't want you to change. I was allowed to be an affirming pastor at this non-affirming church. I wasn't allowed to be very loud with it. I started a group there, parents of queer kids, just to help other parents so I could tell them what I did wrong and how we can get through this process. There is a grief process for parents. It's just normal to think my child's going to be this way, or I want them to be this way, and when they're not, it's this grief. I'll say specifically for parents of trans people, there's a much larger grief process. And I think parents need to be given that opportunity, as it's not a bad thing that you're grieving this. It's part of the process to get to celebrating who your child is. I am loud now. I quit being a pastor in September 2022 after I was told that I needed to remove leadership titles from my LGBTQ leaders. After a year previous, I was told absolutely they can lead. We have a Christian nationalist church in town, 412 Church, with a 3%er pastor. And 2 of his members were arrested and convicted for their part in January 6th. And this pastor was starting to walk into schools where there were queer teachers or unity clubs for any child to feel safe, and trying to get people fired. They're mentally ill, they're groomers. The first time he did it, I was still a pastor, and I followed behind him at the school he went to, and I brought donuts and report from the Trevor Project and said, I'm also a spiritual leader in this town, because that's how he goes in. I'm a spiritual leader here. And I said, there are those of us who appreciate this unity club and your teacher that's offering safe spaces. And here's why. Here's the report. When I was a pastor, I wanted to be loud about him. But being loud about justice issues in an evangelical church can be hard, and people will get upset. I always noticed the hypocrisy and things in the church. I always saw it. I always thought, we can make this better. I was pastoring during Trump, or maybe right before Trump got in. And I remember, talking to one of the church members, and I had quoted Jesus, and he called me a socialist. And I was like, wait, I just quoted Jesus. Why are the words of Jesus becoming so offensive to Christians? And it's just the whole play into Christian nationalism. You can't really quote a whole lot of Jesus when you're a Christian nationalist, because they don't mix. When you meet people and you care about them and you start hearing what they go through, what they live through, that's what changes a relationship. It's in conversations. It's in telling our stories. It's in saying what we did wrong so that the next person can do it right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the why. It's meeting people like Rachel and her story about her daughter. I did that interview with her, and I remember afterwards both of us getting up, and she was more comforting me than I was comforting her, because this entire trip, people met us and they shared their stories so openly and with such vulnerability, and what they've turned their pain into, which is education and awareness and hope for other people to know they're not alone. And that's such another huge reason you've made this film. We've taken this trip, and Rachel's story is just a huge example of that, including the pastor of the church.
Yeah, Drew.
Yeah.
Who it was new. Drew just started with the church, so Drew was taking a bit of a risk bringing us in, and we assured Drew that we were not going to, we're not yelling red or blue or right or left or Republican and Democrat. They were actually words that were off limits. And so you know that we didn't mention anybody's name also, because we really, again, are just there to provide good information. And so we wanted to be bipartisan and nonpartisan, and really just let the audience, as the movie does, let the audience make their own decision, So Drew was trusted us, as did everyone who's ever in a documentary, actually. And like my dad was in a documentary, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, and trusted us to come in and be there and do the thing we said we were going to do. And he was over the moon with our presentation and just our crew, which actually Temecula was our first stop. So it was our get our feet wet. And okay, so when I say I've been prepping this since February, I still am trying to sleep now in October as we film this, catching up. And so when we left for Temecula, we left from North Hollywood. The crew flew in the night before, people from out of town. And I still, until we got on the road 2-3 hours before the event, had been running around like a crazy person, packing, making sure we have everything. And so I was late for breakfast that day when we left and drove to Temecula. So when we landed in Temecula, the RV was a disaster. I mean, just boxes everywhere. We had 7 boxes of T-shirts.
So right now, they just started the documentary, 1946, and we are pretty much putting all of the merch together, organizing it by size and by color, so that way, we could just show up, pop open the box, and then put it back when we're all done. Easy. Easy peasy.
So basically reparative therapy.
There you go.
Do we have our giant banner? It rolls, you grab it you hold your foot down on it, then you pull it up, and it's got a bar that goes in there. It took so much skin off my fingers.
I'll tell you what, when we have Carter, on Carter's episode, we'll have Carter set it up, because for the first day, Carter tried to set it up, and we had no practice. Now, I will tell you, because safety first, we did have a safety meeting, all right, y'all. But yeah, some of the equipment, you might not have ever used before. It's one of those retractable banners, and if you let it go, it's like you will lose a
snap
finger.
your face off.
But Carter figured it out. I came around the corner. I was like, "Is everything okay?" And I didn't even think about it, honestly. And then, that was the day. So, all of our stops, we had the mama bears, and free mom hugs, help us coordinate and send emails and let people know about the event. And so at every stop, we had either a mama bear or a free mom hug. Representative there and giving out free hugs.
You got more than a free hug. You got a pretty special.
So there's a mama bear, a free mom hug member in Temecula who loves to glitter people, and I guess I was Who said no? Somebody who said no, and they were smart, and I was just being polite. I was like, oh man, I really don't want glitter, because if anybody's ever been glittered, it's a mess. So I'm like, for the whole trip, I know I'm gonna have glitter. But I wanted to be polite, and I said yes. And so the whole time she was glittering me,
she got a glitter baptism.
But I smiled and took it. No, it was wonderful. They're cool. Lovely. It was so cool. And she said a prayer over us. But one of the kids said no. And I watched the footage later, and I was like, oh, they're so smart. I could have said no.
Yeah. Speaking of smart and young, they're really good with their technology boxes.
Our Gen Zers.
Our Gen Zers. You, me, and Paul. Yeah. Of the... older, you and Paul a little more older.
What?
Just kidding. We had 6 of us, and even the diversity within our RV was really a huge conversation we had in general of the variations showing up on wheels.
Yeah.
And how we called them the kids for most of the trip, and I think they called us the old farts behind the scenes.
Well, no, later on I was deemed dad.
And I'm mother.
Yeah.
I'm your mother.
I think we'll come out later as you get to know us as we travel across our memory lane of the road trip. But what else do we do in Temecula before we go to stop number 2? Because we're going to talk about stop number 2 here.
Yeah. What did we do?
Well, I do remember Carter the driver backing up that RV like,
Oh.
I mean,
Like a boss.
what's that? The hand in glove. I mean, it was just like
it was like, hey Carter,
curved driveway,
this giant RV
gravel,
needs to go in this curve between the fence. He's like, got
it's
it.
dust.
Cool.
No problem.
Right into place.
I was like, I think I have that on a phone somewhere. We're gonna have to check with Elliot.
You're gonna meet Carter is this quiet, seemingly like docile, calm individual that behind the wheel.
With a vibe.
Ooh!
With the vibe.
An animal behind the wheel, fast and furious, getting us. I mean,
I'll say one more thing too about Temecula and a lot of the people who helped us along the way. So we stayed at Rachel's house because we didn't have funding to pay for housing. Could you imagine like how expensive a trip like this is? So we're like, hey, can you crash us all at your place? Rachel's house was amazing.
gorgeous.
I think it was probably my favorite house out of all of them. And there were some amazing houses we stayed at.
I started to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, house one. I'm like, yo, it's going downhill from here.
Well, and then
Because-
speaking of, next stop, let's talk about Chris and Lynn's stop.
Yeah.
They were wonderful hosts, but woo, their house too. So when we were driving through, do you remember we were like, we just see the houses get bigger and bigger. And part of our ask to the churches, and a lot of the places we played the movie, because we needed free venues to play the movie as well too, the churches stepped up. And while we were asking about housing, we're like, we need a place to park the RV, where it's safe. Because again, safety was a number one concern. And so the houses got bigger, and yes, there was plenty of room for the parking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We had some incredible stays all across this map, and it was cool getting to have meals with families. It felt like this is so cheesy, but it felt like those Bible college days of going out on your quote mission or whatnot. But it's so different now for me, 20 years later, having the same kind of similar experience with a much more diverse and open theology and affirming. To look back at myself all those years to this guy now that got into that RV, what a world of growth and evolution and a lot of pain in my years of loss of friendships or beliefs that you've clung to for your whole life, and finger by finger you release. Why am I still holding on to this? Why am I putting so much pressure on myself to try and be something I simply cannot be? I am who I am, and the freedom I feel in my faith and in my orientation as an out gay man, to get into a journey like this was just like this odd resurrection of a similar mission and hope that was my zeal throughout this entire trip. It's more than 30 gallons. Don't forget this. Hey Carter. No, Carter. He was raptured.
So when we asked Rebecca at Foothills Church about housing, I get a text message. Chris and Lynn have got you covered. And I'm like, okay, great. Chris and Lynn, no problem. I have no idea who they are. I've never met them. We've never spoken on the phone. I don't know anything about their demographic. So in my mind, Chris and Lynn are a lesbian couple. I'm like, this is a lesbian couple,
Yeah.
And so when I pulled up and I see someone who looks like my dad, a retired white cis het man,
Yes.
with gray hair, and it's like, hello, how you doing? And a lot of these people too had never hosted queer people in their house before, which we'll talk about when we get to Frisco, and are on this ally journey of becoming affirming, and opened up their homes to us. And again, we're really beautiful homes. Oh, and you know what? In Phoenix, it was Carter's birthday. Speaking
Yes.
of awesome Carter.
Yeah.
And Rebecca brought a cake over and surprised us. And we sang happy birthday
We got
to
to sing
Carter.
happy birthday, and the puppies chimed in. That was a part of my favorite too, seeing all the pets along the way.
Yeah.
In Temecula, Rachel had a cute little cat.
Oh, two
These cute
cats.
little Frenchie.
The Bengal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're grateful for the hosts and their pets, for the comfort we needed after a long haul in the RV.
Who was our guest speaker?
This incredible gal, Gina.
Yeah.
With an organization called 1 in 10.
1 in 10.
And it was about 1 in 10 people, I think, who have considered suicide or ending their own life, or self-harm type stuff, and how she hosts safe spaces for people to come and talk about those kind of things so they don't feel so alone, even in that nature and topic of things, which you feel like you're the only person who's ever felt like having a conversation or doing that. And it's a very sensitive subject, but she did so well to share about it, and particularly with the LGBTQ youth and homelessness, how as well the stats on so many youth that are homeless are out there because they have been ousted by their Christian families, who at the advice of their pastors or biblical interpretation say, well, we've got to put the immoral brother or sister outside of the camp, and then they'll come back to us in repentance. And that's
Isn't it
not
awful what the church does to people, but
doesn't
then
work out well.
LGBTQ people? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And she was sharing so many stories. One kid she talked about, I think, had met her dad or her partner's dad, and the kid came around. He's like, I don't know how to talk to these kids. And he just sat down next to him and talked about the game. And later on, that kid finally opened up in one of the groups and said, it was that day meeting your dad where he just sat with me and made me feel loved. And he didn't say a word, but he just sat with that kid and talked about jack squat and made him feel...
Sometimes that's all it takes, you know? You just need someone to listen to, or someone to, who just treats you normal.
And she also shared how
Spend normal time with you.
teachers would wear the pink triangle, and just that tiny symbol years back would give LGBTQ students hope that they're seen and known by a teacher, and a certain little signal that the teacher would say, I know you, I see you, you're safe with me, was her whole the whole focus of her organization, that you are safe with me. And that was such a beautiful thing. And hearing Pastor Paul's presentation, the question is like, well, what can I do? It seems so huge. It seems like so overwhelming, but you just start with that little nugget of like your own community.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Gina's doing with
Or
this
sitting
community.
down with a kid like that dad
Bingo.
did. Totally.
Show up.
Yep. Just show up.
Just be there.
Yep. But yeah, the Q&A in Phoenix, you were going to say?
Was just...
Not that I'm trying to get into your personal business, but how can you share with people that there is a way to break through that barrier? Because that's what it is. Once you get told you can't be you and you can't be loved, people don't understand that that's what intimacy is, and that connection and the way you describe it. I'm not allowed to be a part of the church, and I'm not allowed to be a part of the world. So why am I here? And that's the message I'm personally, like, I'm just loving this whole thing because I've been doing it, and I didn't know that there was movements going on with it.
Yeah, I think one thing, when I was raised in the church, one of the things I've noticed is when we talk about straight couples, we're talking about love and this beautiful relationship. We talk about gay couples, we're talking about lust. And I was like, really? So I think seeing that disconnect, and then I remember going to a Josh McDowell conference years ago, and he defined it as love can't wait to give, lust can't wait to get. And I'm like, I know straight couples that lust, you know? And so I just think that we have to educate ourselves and educate those around us to really grow in that area. So for me personally, it's a continued journey. I'm learning more. Maybe Rocky will make a movie about that one day when there's more to share.
And it's so heartbreaking because so many of us have felt that same way, like we don't get to have intimacy. We don't get love because we're other, because we're abomination, because we've been told our whole lives from a certain biblical interpretation, you don't get to play like the rest of us. Go join the singles ministry. That might be your gifting. Okay.
The singles ministry, oh boy.
Ed said that there
We're
was...
so lucky. Well, you know what they're teaching the kids now today? Well, they're teaching a perspective where, well, you might be born gay, but we're all born with something. So yeah, it is the singles ministry, but it's more or less your choice is celibacy or a mixed orientation marriage. So they accept the fact that people are born that way, but you have to pick up your cross and bear it. And if you want to be in a relationship, these are your choices. There you go. Happy youth group, happy Sunday. But here's the cool thing about the kids in youth group these days. They ain't gonna take that. They're not gonna listen to that. They're gonna be like, oh, I know my friend. I know my queer friends. and they're going to stick up for each other. I have faith in the Gen Zers.
Yeah.
What's after Gen Z? Is there a next generation? Oh my goodness.
It's gonna be Gen L.
No,
There's,
there
like, everything's
is one.
L.
There is one. Who knows what
Is
it
it?
is?
It's Gen Alpha and
Alpha?
Gen Beta.
Gen Alpha and Gen Beta. Thank you, Carter. Carter's
you,
on
Carter.
the camera,
Carter
too.
on set.
Gen Alpha and Gen Beta.
Beta.
See, I always said we brought the Gen Zers on so we could learn something because we needed to learn.
We didn't learn.
No. Yeah. Okay. So what else did we do in Phoenix? I don't know. That was it. Then we went.
Well, I want to talk about the Q&A.
yeah.
There was these two guys there who just like seemed so just like gruff and tough and big, and they came up to Paul or Ed afterwards and couldn't even get words out. They were just sobbing because they were so moved by us showing up, by what the message of the movie was, and that they said, I have been following this for so long, and this makes me feel so powerful and so seen and so not alone. And that's what we got to experience this entire trip.
Even the word homosexual is a fairly new word.
Right.
And so some people will be like, yeah, spoiler alert, the movie doesn't matter because the meaning was still there. It's still, the act is still there. But know that the act that's going on in the Bible is very different than the term homosexual and what we know it to mean. And even the word heterosexual has changed so much. Heterosexual, Kathy Boldock teaches us, they were the deviants back in the day. If you look up the old definition of heterosexuals,
They still are.
Well, you're right. And so, and they can do these acts and things too, right? So language changes, evolves, and as we know more, are we doing more, and how are we learning and evolving with it? So yeah, we need to give ourselves grace,
Yes,
as LGBTQ people and as allies as we're on this journey together. So I love that story. That's a beautiful story.
And that's the beauty. That's the story of you and your dad, and that's why so many people love your story. Is that you're like, man, we do not agree, but you give your dad so much space, so much grace, when so many people in the audience are like, Dad, but you, it's your dad, and you gotta love him, and you do, and you love him well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I got here because I'm very confused, I guess, is the whole thing. There's so much that we grew up learning that I want to learn the truth. I want to learn why our country is so divided right now. And growing up one way and thinking that things were the norm and finding out that they're not is kind of, it's disheartening to be 68 years old and now finding out that we're told mistruths. I just don't get how people can be so unhappy and so hateful towards other people. Life's too short. People are wonderful. People are people. No matter what they think, what they may feel inside, they're people. And just get to know the person, not what you think they should be.
So I guess as we wrap up an episode, what is your hope for what we're doing with this podcast? What is your hope for what we're doing with this?
My hope would be to reach more people. We had the opportunity to reach over 1,000 people in person. So in-person impact, one-on-one, which was great, people in a room. And beyond that, I know we've impacted so many more. And the movie's now available on Amazon and people can see it. But my goal has always been that this movie should be seen by everyone around the world. And these kinds of conversations need to be seen by everyone around the world because the way that we use or misuse scripture matters, the way we treat people matters, and the movie is non-threatening. Our approach is non-threatening. We really just want to engage in a conversation to help us understand more. And if you don't agree with us, that's totally cool. We'd love to dialogue with you. We're not looking to debate. We don't want to be put in a situation where we're going to be bombarded by someone who just wants to tell us how right they are. And one of the things that I love about our team, and one of the things I love about Kathy and Ed and their work, is the ability to admit when you're wrong. Or when you're a researcher, you go in with a theory. And if you disprove your theory, well, then you account for it in your findings. And we respect that. So that would be my hope, is for people to be able to have civic engagement with one another as we talk about the hard things and do the hard work so we can love on each other better.
Yeah.
I know it sounds simple, but it's so hard.
So, quick thank you to everyone for watching, listening, tuning in from beginning to end. And you want to stay tuned for the next episode because we've got a lot more that happened on the road and we're going to tell all.
It's a wild ride. We love you, and we'll see you on the socials at 1946themovie.com, or you could follow us on our website, 1946themovie.com. See ya!
Thank you to our sponsors, makingthingsright.org, for your generous donation and helping us produce this podcast, and to Uncut Studios in downtown Los Angeles. Step into a studio unlike any other. To learn more, follow them at Uncut Studios DTLA on Instagram.